Hey, everybody, welcome to The Wrong End of the Snake. It's a webcast about audio, touring, and the relationships we have built between our road families. Tater and I have had an 18-year relationship on The Wrong End of the Snake with bands like Ted Nugent, Kid Rock, Slash, Stone Temple Pilots, Prophets of Rage, Iron Maiden, and most notably 10 years as front of house and monitor mixers for Linkin Park. My co-host, Kevin Tater McCarthy, is a world-class monitor engineer with over 30 years in the business. I'm very proud to call him my friend. He has 8 Top Dog Monitor Engineer of the Year awards and 2 Parnelli Monitor Mixer of the Year awards. I am Ken Van Druden, aka Pooch. I am a front house engineer with 3 decades in the music industry. I'm a 3-time Grammy-nominated recording engineer. I have 8 Top Dog Front of House Engineer of the Year awards, and I am also a winner of the Parnelli Front of House of the Year award. Let's do a little housekeeping. Please use the chat window of the Zoom app to communicate amongst yourselves. If you are streaming from our YouTube channel and you want to be able to ask questions of our guests, register to be on the Zoom call for future episodes. Links to register are in all of our social media. If you have any questions for our guests, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app. We will answer as many questions as possible during the hour, and then answer any leftover questions in our Q&A overtime episode. Look for that to be uploaded in our YouTube channel in a few days. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to visit our social media. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is at Wrong End of the Snake. Tater, why don't you tell us about our guest this week?
I like that we're so socially connected. I didn't know we had all that. Fantastic. This week, we have Jim SURVIS. Jim's a backline technician and personal assistant for some of the most recognized artists and bands in the music business. His clients include Guns N' Roses, Lenny Kravitz, Jonny Lang, Foreigner, Van Halen, Kiss, Lynard Skynyrd, Smashing Pumpkins, Aerosmith, Black Crowes, Cheap Trick, and many, many, many others. He works in the studios with these artists and has toured around the world for over 3 decades. Let's welcome Mr. Awesome, Jim SURVIS. Thank you, Jim.
And the crowd goes wild. I figure the NFL can have some crowd. We should have that as well.
That was better than the NFL's.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
I didn't know you guys were doing sound effects.
Well, that's as far as detailed as we've gotten. Hey, man, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Both Tater and I have toured with you, and you're just such a great person and an inspiration. We really wanted you to be on here to talk with us a little bit about your journey and how you got here, and the relationships that you've made, because you're at the top of your game as a backline technician and personal assistant guy. We're glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's weird to hear the personal assistant thing. There's a couple of those jobs that I've had, but 97% of it has been backline and live and studio work, and
Right.
There's been some personal assistant stuff peppered in along the way for some interesting stories, but certainly not.
Well, I think I brought that up because as a backline guy, oftentimes you are truly a personal assistant for the guy that you're working for when they're at the gig, right?
It's an overlap, yeah.
Yeah. Whenever they show up in their limo, then all of a sudden you become the guy that's like, going to the dressing room and bringing them whatever they need, and
Yeah. There's a lot of interaction, which I like usually.
Yeah.
We'll
Cool.
say there's a bit of a handoff from the management team give them a little bit of a break when they get them to the venue and hand them off to their techs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they're doing to us.
Yeah.
That's what
Handoff.
they're doing.
And they did
All
Vader.
these years. Why don't we start at the beginning like we always do with our guests, and kind of tell us where you came from. You grew up in Canada, right?
Yeah, well, I was born in Chicago and moved to Canada when I was a little kid. My father's Canadian, and grew up basically, Vancouver Island area, and entered the business from Vancouver Island, you know, in the little bar band scene we had going on, which actually wasn't so little. It was a pretty vibrant and busy bar band scene in those days, which I'm grateful for, because, you know, it wasn't like we were playing once in a while. We were playing, you know, 45 weeks a year or something. I mean, we were playing 6 nights a week. And
I take it this was 80s, mid 80s?
yeah, early 80s is when I started in the bar bands. I started rehearsing I got the job in late 79 in the winter, and we started rehearsing, and I think I did my first gig. My friend Rob Becker has a log of all the dates that he's ever done in his life. He's the bass player and the guy that, one of the guys that gave me my first chance. But he said, I think it was February or March in 1980, I went out and did a show with my fake ID and started working in bars, you know, a lot, like full time.
So you were like growing up a little bit before that, were you always a guitar player, or what was your instruments of choice?
I was a huge enthusiast. And I didn't play any instruments when I started. I was a teenager, and I was 17, and I could play you some Smoke on the Water riff, or, you know, I mean,
Right.
I was like any other kid around that day, or, you know, you had a couple of riffs or whatever. But I started doing working for bands before I could ever play, and, you know, primarily it was lighting. So, you know, I got my first jobs. It's like, you know, you drive the truck, you load in, you set up the lights, operate the lights, and set up or assist the setup with the back line. Everybody kind of pitched in usually until later. And then I would just set up all the lights and all the back line. And that's actually how I introduced myself to backline, just out of necessity. You know, hey, you got to do this. So, okay, where does this plug in?
I think, you know, that's a common thread when we talk to our guests, is that, you know, all of our guests are always somebody that in the beginning we're like, I'll do anything. I'll do whatever it takes to, you know, be a part of this.
Fake it till you make it. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I would do anything. And at that point I had nothing else to do. And I was pretty directionless. You know, it was kind of a turbulent upbringing as a kid. And when the music business opportunity fell into my lap, it was like all of a sudden I felt like I had purpose. I had a gang I belonged to. You know, it really felt good to have something to wake up for. And I wasn't making any money. I think at first they were giving me, like, you know, sandwich money or something. I mean, I basically just did it for free because, you know, I was a kind of a couch surfing guy anyway. And why not? Why wouldn't you want to do that? You know,
is this Vancouver Island or Vancouver?
This was the band was from Vancouver Island, Nanaimo. And that's the second largest city on the island, next to Victoria, which is the province, the capital. But we play everywhere, and when you played in downtown Vancouver, what they call the Lower Mainland, that was reserved for bands that proved themselves and were good and could play those A rooms. And so that was everybody's motivation. And when I first started, we weren't playing a whole ton of A rooms, but we dabble in there, and we were fighting like a lot of the other bands were, and there was a lot of bands. It was, you know, everybody had production. There was no, you know, in-house in the club. Everybody had a 5-ton truck and lights and PA, and, you know, and went around and played Monday to Saturday night, and, you know, wherever. And you'd travel around and play all the little towns all over BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, week to week to week to week. And when your band was good enough, you were brought into Vancouver to dominate. And,
no Kamloops or Grand Prairie? Any good places like
yeah,
that?
yeah. Played Kamloops. I lived in Kamloops. That was my very first arena concert. Was in Kamloops. Nazareth, the Hair of the Dog tour, played the little hockey arena that was blocks from where I was living. And so yeah, that's I was up there for a couple of years as a kid too. But I played there. Yeah, that would have been a typical stop. Kamloops, Prince George, Abbotsford, Kelowna, all those little towns.
Kelowna, yeah.
In the West. But you know what? I was super grateful. Some of the guys I'd worked with had been doing it for a while, so they wanted to be playing in Vancouver and not out in the sticks. But for me, the sticks was awesome, and I was just happy to be doing it. Period.
And it's beautiful country out there too. So
yeah, it's
very
really
beautiful.
Really something else.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. So closely, and to be able to travel around and see it on the ground inch by inch like that it was a treat for sure.
For sure. So what was your first big break?
My first big break. Well, I was a regional guy before I ever became international guy. So I guess to back it up, my first break was, we were talking about getting into the A circuit, and I got this band, some friends of mine, they had a band called Steelback, and they were doing real well. They had an EP, some record people, and they were doing pretty good. And so that for me, what's to do now? It really felt like something. And so the Steelback was the bar band that I learned how to cut my teeth. So that was the bar band breakthrough. And then I started working for regional acts that had records out. And there was, we had some good management companies in Vancouver, namely Bruce Allen Talent, which had Bryan Adams, he broke Bachman Turner,
Aldo Nova.
There's a long list. I think he's got Michael Bublé now. He was the big powerhouse manager in there, and so there was some action going on internationally out of Vancouver. So I kind of got to know a couple people there and wallowed around Vancouver, and I got a job with this Canadian band called Trooper. And I don't know if you guys ever heard of Trooper?
No.
I think so.
Trooper was in Canada. They're Canada's, there's Canadian like apple pie is American. Very well known in Canada. A lot of hits, especially back when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s back then. And Trooper had multiple records out. They were professionally managed. You ever hear them play that song "Raise a Little Hell" like at hockey games and stuff?
Oh yeah.
That's Trooper.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's them, and that was the one hit song that they did that did well down in the States, but they're primarily a Canadian band. So I got with Trooper. Now Trooper doesn't play week-long gigs. You're working with recording band. You're doing one-offs, one-nighters, and so then I shifted gears and started doing one-offs and with Trooper, and they weren't playing huge venues. We were doing a lot of bigger bar stuff, but it taught me how to do that. And the guitar player, a guy named Smitty, Brian Smith is his real name, kind of brought me under his wing a little bit and showed me some game on guitar, some etiquette, how to do shit right, what to do, what not to do. He was a real good guitar player, real wide open, blasting attitude guitar player, but he showed me a lot of stuff. And so I went kind of from being a guy that considered himself a lighting guy who could set up some backline, and all of a sudden it started shifting, and the backline thing started growing with Trooper. And with Trooper I moved on to another Canadian band called Headpins, which was had some records out, and then I got the Loverboy gig.
Yes.
And the Loverboy
now
gig
it's big time.
The first gig that was an international band and not Canadian or regional or a bar band for me. That was an international band managed by a big international agency in Vancouver. So that was really the breakthrough for me into the bigger leagues. And it was an ass kicking because those guys were used to better than I was able to give them at the time that they hired me.
Now, are you shifting to guitars at this point?
Yes. Yeah. Lights were long in the rearview mirror, or not long, but they were gone. And it was all backline. And I would do drums and guitar and keys or whatever you had to set up. But with those guys, it was primarily guitar. And I had a lot to learn. And, I was hanging on for dear life and just working as hard as I can. And hopefully that got recognized. I guess it did because, there was people that could do it better than me. My price was probably pretty attractive.
Reasonable price. Yeah, for sure.
I did whatever I had to do. And so I got the Loverboy gig and right out of the same office as Bryan Adams. So yada, yada, yada. I'm working for Bryan Adams and shortly thereafter, did a little running around with him. And then by then I started I was starting to gain a little bit of traction and able to apply for more jobs with confidence because I'd done a couple of things.
And the crew sizes are growing as you're doing this too, from that first band Steelback to the Trooper. There's probably one or two more guys on the crew till you get to Mike Reno and the boys, and then there's more people. And then Bryan Adams, you're on a real touring crew at that point.
Yeah. Even Adams back then, I think I got Adams around 1990, right around there somewhere. And even Adams it felt kind of smallish then, maybe because I knew everybody, but it was all the guys from Vancouver that I'd kind of come up with that were a little ahead of me in the climbing of the ladder, and I started, you just started getting confidence and stuff. And we had another guitar tech out of Vancouver, a guy named Frank Felder, who's not with us anymore, but
Franklin.
So Frank and I were both kind of had the same story about, scratching through the bars and then the local regional bands and stuff. And then when Franklin got the Aerosmith gig doing Brad Whitford, they came up to record Permanent Vacation, I think. Little Mountain was on fire and everybody was recording there. And Franklin got the gig with Aerosmith because, he knew everybody in town and he could make shit happen and could take care of your guitars. And if you needed, he was the guy. And that gave me a lot of confidence because we were peers.
Right.
And I thought, this guy is like doing it. And if he can do it, I can do it. It made me realize I can do it.
Yeah.
I kind of, that was a big boost. Shout out to Franklin, wherever you are, buddy.
Yeah.
Man, that was such a great loss when we lost him. It's,
it was.
Later on, I want to talk a little bit about, the mental part of this game, especially in COVID right now, because a lot of guys are going through tough times, guys and girls. And, we lost Franklin to some
way too
bad. It's rough out there. It's, there's a lot of people struggling, and every time I feel a little sorry for myself, I try and remember that and stop
for sure
for myself because man, if this thing happened when I had a young family trying to struggle with making the little bit that I did at that time, it could have been I put myself in those shoes and.
Yeah. At least it might take you out of the business. You might not have had the long career that you had, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, who was the first American band?
First American band. Yeah, we're still doing Canada.
Because you're kind of still Canadian. You might feel, okay, I'm going to conquer the world now.
Okay, so the first American, I got Gino Vanelli, too, on that little Canadian part of the story, who was really a prog rock icon up there. Maybe not as much in the States, but that also kind of helped my momentum. I just want to mention that. My first American band was a fragmented BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Is that considered an American band?
Well, I guess not, but they were international, like
okay.
And okay, let's shit.
Or American or European. Anyone not really Canadian.
It was, I think, Aerosmith.
It was, okay.
I believe it was Aerosmith. Before I worked for Aerosmith, I spent a couple of years with Jimmy Page, and I got to do a record with him, the Coverdale Page record.
Wow.
So we were in the studio for about a year. That was pre-Aerosmith. It wasn't American. It was English, obviously. But we recorded it. We started the recording at Little Mountain, then moved it to Miami for the rest of it. And then after that, I got the Aerosmith gig, which I was at for like 18 years or something. And so in between the Aerosmith, at the beginning part of Aerosmith, we worked a ton. Their career was hot. They were selling a lot of records, and time is money, and they wasted none of it. So we were working a lot. So when they would take time off, it would be like a year, and then I would go out and grab another tour. So in between Aerosmith tours, I was working with other cats.
So let's back up a little bit, because I know that people want to know, how you get your work, right? So Tater and I always talk about a lot of our work is word of mouth now, but like when we first started, our relationships were how we got our jobs. Knowing a friend of yours, like, maybe talk about maybe Franklin got you a job or whatever. How did you get your work then? And how do you get your work now? If I were an up and coming backline guy, who do I talk to get some jobs? Not now, but you know what I mean? Like when the world goes back to being normal.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we're word of mouth now. So I haven't had to dig like I had to dig earlier, but I got a good one for you. When I was going after the Aerosmith gig, like I said, everybody was recording at Little Mountain. I had heard that those guys were coming up to do another record because I knew everybody at Little Mountain. And it was like, hey, Aerosmith's coming up in a couple of months. And they were coming up to make Get a Grip. They'd already had Pump and a Permanent Vacation success. And
small records.
And here's what I did. I looked on the back of the record, the Pump record, which I owned because I loved it. And I looked on the back of the records and it said, Collins Management, Cambridge, Mass. And this is before internet or looking, and I found the number for Collins Management in Cambridge, Mass. And I cold called them.
Wow.
Nice one.
Yeah. I mean, my heart was racing. I was nervous. And I thought to myself, what have I got to lose?
What have you got to lose?
I got nothing to lose. I'm going to call him up. And I said, well, I'm probably just going to get some secretary and get my name scratched on a piece of paper at best. And, but I've got to try. So I call him up and I get a secretary. Hello, Collins Management. And I said, hey, it's Jim Service calling. And I'm a guitar tech. I live in Vancouver. And yada, 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 BS, whatever I said. I said, I understand you guys are coming up here to do a project, and I wanted to put it out there that I'm available if you guys need any help technically or as a liaison to the city, music stores, whatever you need. I'm here if you need me. I just wanted to let that be known. She was like, okay, great, thanks for calling. And about 2 weeks go by, and I'm sitting in my apartment, and the phone rings, and my wife picks it up, and she goes, there's a guy on the phone named Joe Perry wants to talk to you.
Holy crap.
What? And she didn't know who it was. She didn't know who Joe Perry was. And
you did.
I knew who Joe Perry was.
But you did.
And I said, what? And she saw my face and she goes, who is it? And I said, well, hold on. And I took the phone and I went into the den where it was quiet because I needed to focus on my shit.
Yeah.
And I got on the phone. It was Joe. And he was like, hey, man, heard you're available. And at this point, I'd already worked for Jimmy Page.
Oh,
So
that
the
definitely
friend
helped.
level was flowing strong. Yeah. And, and that probably gave me the confidence to call his manager in the first place. But he called me and said, hey, we're coming up and, short interview, really just to kind of see what the vibe was. We didn't talk anything guitars. I think he asked me what Jimmy was using in the studio about, primarily, but, and he said, well, great. I'm going to have my tour manager call you. And, in the next hour, the tour manager called me and we worked out an arrangement, and those guys were recording like a month later with me in the studio. I couldn't believe it.
And let's just remember that they called you at the apartment because there was no cell phones. Let's just throw that out. Luckily you were home.
Major. It was.
Luckily you were home. They didn't get Joe didn't get your answering machine.
Yeah.
I could have been out on the road with some, bar band, which isn't a bad thing. Work is great, but I could have been not available to pick up that call. And
yeah. Which brings me to the point, we talk about a lot on this about being in the right place at the right time is a thing. It is absolutely a thing, but putting yourself in the right place at the right time, that's kind of the key, right? And that story you just told is a perfect example of, you're like, what have I got to lose? Let me call the guy and see what happens, That
was bold.
And then the right thing happened, you know what I mean? But had you not called Collins Management, you wouldn't have had that opportunity. So all you guys out there that are watching this and are young and are coming up in this business, it's a huge lesson, Yeah,
it worked for me. And, you can't do it with too cocky or whatever. Just, go in there and just be forthright. And you know what? It's funny because, sometimes your stomach kind of flutters or you can really feel the nerves. And it's happened to me a couple of times with women that I've been in love with or what ended up in love with later, whatever. That's the kind of feeling, that afraid, nervous butterfly thing. And that's the feeling I had when I called Collins Management too. It's and I think feeling that kind of fear is probably good for you.
It is. Have you ever had that feeling working for a specific guy? Like maybe the first time you met Joe Perry, or has there been someone else in your career where you're like
Jimmy Page?
Jimmy Page thing for me was, and I met Jimmy before Joe. I worked for him a couple of years before I got the Aerosmith gig. And it's funny that the guitar tech for Bryan Adams, who I was friends with, shout out to Lance Question. He got the Jimmy Page's manager called Bruce Allen, Bryan Adams' manager, because Jimmy was coming to Vancouver to make a record and he needed somebody. And so he called up Bryan Adams' manager to see there was somebody local so that he wouldn't have to fly in an English guy, put him in a hotel and all this stuff, because he didn't have a guy. And so they went to Lance Question, Brian's guy. And Lance was busy with Brian, and they said, who else do we got? And Lance said me. And I'll never be able to appreciate him anymore, because that was monumental. So, but anyway, to get back to your question, I got that gig. It was in Little Mountain in Studio A. A lot of big records are made in Studio A, and it's kind of a famous place, and just being in there is a big deal. And so the manager says, Jimmy's gear is shipping over. It'll be there on such and such date. I need you to get it all ready, up and running and ready to record. He'll be in on this date. And I got the gear about a week before he got there. And it was in crates like you see on Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. Like,
you had to get a crowbar out and ratchet them open. Yeah.
Furniture trading company that had, really beautifully packaged up, his guitars and stuff. And I don't know if you know this about him, but he's got a small palette of sound colors. He only has about a dozen guitars that he's used for his entire career. And there might be a few more now because I haven't been around him in a while, but the same amps as the Zeppelin stuff and the same everything, all the stuff that you'd seen pictures of and the Zoso cabinets and all of the stuff, Theremin, all of that shit showed up. And I'm cracking open Raiders of the Lost Ark boxes with a crowbar, freaking out the whole time, telling just positive I'm going to be fired the first day. I'm fired. I don't even know why I'm here. Believe me, I was struggling with confidence because it was Jimmy. And I got the gear up. I remember pulling out this Anvil road case, and I laid it across the corner of the big Raiders of the Lost crate. And I knew what was in there, and it was like opening up the Ark of the Covenant, because the size of the case was absolutely the right size of this thin on it. And I kind of paused, and I popped that thing open, and there sat the double neck. And and I just, that was the guitar that was the poster over my bed with Page playing it as I grew up. So it was something else. So anyway, I get all this gear set up, and I'm freaking out the whole time. And Jimmy and David Coverdale walk in the studio a week later, and I'm all ready for him that morning. And through the soundproof door, I had my guitar tech area set up in kind of a foyer before the control room and the live room at Studio A. There was a kind of a room that you could set up like a guitar station, and I was set up in here, and I could hear Jimmy and David talking to the staff outside of the door, and I'm like, hello, mate, and lovely, isn't cheerio, and all this shit. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And the door pops open. It's those guys. And I guess I didn't melt onto the floor like I felt like I was going to do. But we got to work, and I didn't get fired.
Now, real quick, we don't get real technical on this show or anything, but maybe the younger guys out there that don't get to experience the studio with the artist, just give us a quick rundown of what the differences maybe are between what you do in the studio and what you're doing live.
Well, I'm so glad that a lot of live guitar techs don't ever get to do the studio. Sometimes it's two different things. Some guys don't like a tech in the studio. It's distracting. Other guys do. So I'm really fortunate. And plus, when Pro Tools came out, the whole, loading into the studio and, making a record for, 10 months or a year, went away. So the art is kind of gone like it used to be. And there's less need for staff in a recording studio making a big budget record like there used to be, because you can make one in your shower now on your laptop. But working in the studio, it's not for everybody. I know a lot of techs that it's too boring for them. Sometimes there's waiting and editing, and you're out picking up lunch because or moving cars around because somebody's double parked, whatever it takes. You're the guy, and if you're not working on guitars or something, you're off making something else happen, because there's always something that needs to be happening. But a lot of touring guys don't necessarily like that. I've talked to several that are like, the studio, it isn't my cup of tea, but I really like it. And I've been super fortunate to work with some badass producers in my career, and a whole bunch of different ones. And, there's no handbook, how do you produce a record? So each one of these guys has a different approach and a different bedside manner with the artist, and a different creative input or psychology. But my first record was a Loverboy record, and I did that with Bob Rock before any of the Metallica stuff was made, and so that was my first time making a record, was with Bob Rock. and from there it was, Bruce Fairbairn and
from there, it's like,
yeah, and I mean,
you started with one of the best producers in the world, and then worked with the rest of them.
He hadn't even done his best thing yet. He was shooting up like a rocket, but his best work was yet to come. But
Loverboy had a bunch of hits though. If you look back, even if you're not a fan, you know a lot of their songs.
Yeah, you're gonna go to the show and sing them all. I'll tell you that. But they were super successful. But working with Page, people forget that guy produced all 10 Zeppelin records. I look at Jimmy Page as a, his oversight and his umbrella of brilliance. He sees the full, huge picture. And I was trying to think, I was thinking about what a brilliant producer he was and how soaring those vocals were out of Robert Plant. I mean, Robert Plant's like 18, 19 years old, kind of fresh off the turnip truck, where Jimmy has already been in the Yardbirds and done studio work. And he was only about 21, I believe, when Zeppelin broke. But I mean, I don't ever remember hearing any records that sounded like Zeppelin before Zeppelin, these soaring vocals and really brave, the sound collages and like Whole Lot of Love and, Heartbreaker. I mean, there's, he really went for it, almost in a super brave kind of English way, like a George Martin or something. But yeah, working for me in the studio, I can't get enough of it. I've got to work with, Kevin Shirley and, Glenn Ballard. I mean, some of these guys, Jack Douglas, who produced all the early Aerosmith and Cheap Trick, and John Lennon, and
that's crazy. If you're watching this and you don't know any of those names that he just named, like go check them out, because those are what he just named were like the top producers of that era that made every huge record. And to me, they're records that sound better than anything else, even to this day. And so, man, I'm super jealous of you to have to.
Yeah, it's just lucky, the route that I took and the artists that I took, and that they needed me in the studio.
And that studio got hot too, and you were in that area.
Yeah, right.
The studio was hot. Everybody knew me, and I knew everybody. So that worked out good. The whole team up there, the engineers and the assistants that later became great producers in themselves. Mike Fraser used to be the janitor at Little Mountain. His uncle owned the studio, and as a teenager, he'd spend his summers in there sweeping up. Before it was a rock and roll place, they were making jingles and stuff at Little Mountain, and he slept up in the loading bay loft where they got that killer drum sound, hung all those mics. Before those mics were up there, Mike Fraser used to sleep up there with his sleeping bag, because going home was too far to come back and be there in the morning. So and look at that guy, he's producing AC/DC and
Kiss, everything.
Yeah, he's just it's nice. We were all kind of, we knew each other, and we all hadn't done too much at the time, but we were all kind of trying to push ahead together and help each other, hey, call this guy or call this guy. And it was fertile down there, Motley Crue was coming, Poison, Bon Jovi, everybody was coming to Vancouver to make their records, these big AC/DC, those guys were, when we were up there with Aerosmith, they were, I think it was Razor's Edge they were doing in the other room. I can't remember.
So that's the right place, but that's also, we talk about relationships here, and I've said this 100 times. It's like, don't be a dick, because you never know who you're talking to. You know what I mean? And so all those people that you were surrounded with that were coming up just like you were, if you had a reputation of being hard to work with, or even one guy started talking about how you were hard to work with, all of those relationships may have suffered. And so I think it's really important to point out that you were navigating through that as well.
trying to humbly navigate, one moment you're all feeling like, the king of the world and extra cocky. And then the next minute you're like, I don't deserve this and I'm not worthy. So, as a young man, you're struggling with that. And until you get a little more comfortable in your skin and are able to go ahead. But yeah, you gotta, relationships are everything.
Yeah, but when you're strapping on a guitar over Jimmy Page's head and putting it on his neck, that's got to feel pretty good.
Yeah, that was a cool.
You're allowed to get a little cocky on that one.
And I'm so glad I got that gig when I was young, because it gave me it gave my career legs,
Yeah, confidence.
Yeah.
But I never, I made a record with him. It lasted about a year. I never went on tour with Jimmy. The Coverdale Page tour was reduced to a handful of contractually obligated shows for Geffen in Japan, which by the time they were doing them, I had already got the Joe Perry gig with Aerosmith. And so I gracefully bowed out. I talked to Jimmy's manager and he said, take the Aerosmith gig. We're not going to work much after this for the next year or so. And so I did that. I had a point, but anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great. So then take us 13 years with Joe Perry. There's got to be some stories there, man.
It was 92. I think it was September of 92 to 2010.
Wow.
My last show with Aerosmith was at Sturgis at the bike rally. Steven went off the front of the stage and broke himself.
That was your last gig with Aerosmith?
Yeah, I'd been really frustrated. I'd been there a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of work going on and stuff. And I decided I needed a change. And as much as I loved those guys, and I still do, it was just time to kind of move on. And there was other gigs kind of around. And that's actually when I first got over to Kiss. I believe that might have been my first stop once I left Aerosmith.
Got it.
Now,
but that's a super long-term relationship. So there's got to be lots of stories there. Is there anything you can share with us with Joe?
Stories. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff without going into much. It was great. It was to be around and to hear those songs go by on the radio when you were the guy in the studio making them.
Right.
And you remember the overdub of the.
Remember the take, yeah.
You remember it, and it really kind of tickles your soul to think back but yeah, Joe. It's funny. I hadn't seen Joe for a long time, and when I decided I was going to move on and do something else, I kind of took a few people by surprise, including him. And then I didn't see him for a long time, but we were rolling. I was with, I think I was with Lenny Kravitz a couple of years ago, and we were rolling into Manchester. We'd been on the driving all day and took the ferry, and we were rolling in. It was like dinner time, cloudy Manchester day. And in the European buses, sometimes they got the window in the bunk.
Little window, yep.
Yeah, so I had a bunk with a window in it, and we went by a billboard that said Hollywood Vampires tonight at, in the arena. And I got on my phone, and it was like, the map where it was like 2 miles from where I was, and doors were in like a half an hour. And so I called my buddy down there, and I said, yeah, meet me at the back door. Well, we'll, this will be great. Yeah. So I go to the back door, and they give me all my stuff, and I go in, and Joe's assistant, who's been with him forever, a guy named John Bianelli, thought it would be funny to put me in the meet and greet lineup. Now remember, I haven't seen Joe in like 8-10 years. Awesome. This is going to be great. We're going to put you in the meet and greet lineup and blow his mind. And I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Let's do it.
So it's the Hollywood Vampires. So it's Alice Cooper and Johnny Depp and Joe and who's the other guy? No, it's just those three. And so they're doing pictures, and different groups are walking up, and I'm waiting in line, kind of keeping my hat down or whatever. And then it was my turn, and I went, walked in and went, "Joe Perry, I want to kiss your face," or whatever. And he goes, he holds his heart like Fred Sanford. And does the buckling of the knee.
Oh man!
And the other two guys, Alice Cooper and Johnny Depp, are like, "What the hell is it? Who's this guy?"
Yeah,
and
totally.
It was a really super warm,
moment. Yeah, it was a moment.
I hadn't seen him in so long, and it really made me feel great that that we both still love each other, and there was there's no hard feelings. And he knew, he always he knows he's a hard bucking Bronco to stay on. And it had been a lot of years of a lot of, it's a dramatic camp.
Yeah.
And I just needed a change, but and he understood it. And that was a fun little moment with me and Joe.
There was a story that I heard about Joe was, I guess, was out on some thrust or something and broke the jack on his guitar, and you picked up the spare and were mimicking his moment. Tell us that story, because I heard that story. It was that's
Who told you that?
I can't remember. I just remember it. Someone was saying, "Oh, that's Jim Service," and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like Jim."
There's hardly anybody that knows that story, and I've only told a few people. Maybe JD told you, whatever. That's such a good one. Thanks for reminding me of that. So we used to end the show with "Let the music do the talking."
Right.
And that's a particular guitar. It's not that it matters. It's a Dan Armstrong guitar, an open A. So it's a chordal tuning. I don't know if you guys know about chordal tunings, but with a chordal tuning, you can hit the guitar open without putting your left hand on it anywhere, and it sounds like the chord that you've tuned it to. So in this case, it was an A, and it's good for playing slide on, for those of you guys that don't know. So the guitar was in an open tuning, which allowed me to do what I did, but Joe would do this big ending where they do this big slide thing and kind of crescendoing all this energy, and then he would take the guitar off and he'd throw it down on its ground, on its back, and he would rip his shirt off, and then he would whip the guitar, and he would do it and the whole band would do the pushes with him, so it'd be like crang, crang,
right,
crang, and the whole band's doing it together, right? And my Guitar World was right behind the drum kit, behind Kramer. And Joe's down at the very end of this long ass thrust and another zip code. And he rips his guitar off, throws it down, rips his shirt off. And about 2 hits into it, he breaks the jack off of the guitar and disables it. And the big crescendo ending of the set. So I don't know how I ever did this so quickly or thought of it and just did it, but instinct took over, and I grabbed the spare, which is the same guitar in the same open tuning, and I turned it on and hit B on my selector.
Oh man!
And I'm right next to Kramer, so as Joe was doing his, because he kept doing his thing, all the monitors, everything, it's all coming out the PA. As he kept doing his thing, I kept doing the crang, crang with Kramer, because he's right there. So I'm tight with the band. And I thought for me to run out there and try and swap guitars in this moment would ruin the moment.
Yeah.
Totally would.
So I just did it. And so he finished it and did, he hits it about 20 times. And then the next move is he picks the thing up and then he freaks out with the slide as he's kind of spinning around. And so I did all of that too. And
that's so
and
awesome.
And then the big final, ending and stuff, and then
and he never noticed. He never noticed he wasn't playing it, right?
Didn't know he didn't play the end of it. So they're all sweaty and they take off and they go. And I don't even think I talked to him that night. It might have been the next day or the next show. And I said, at sound check or whatever, I was like, hey man, that's pretty crazy ending the other night or whatever. He goes, yeah, and I said, that was me playing. And he went, what? And I said, yeah, that whole ending, you broke your guitar. So I just finished up for you from back there. And he went, you did not.
Oh, man.
Yes, I did. And because I could see where his hand was moving too, so I could move the slide up or down or whatever. And we laughed our asses off. He said, "Oh, that was perfect." He goes, "That was like a Who moment, man. That's a Who road story, And I was like, "Yeah, I guess it kind of is. This is awesome."
He didn't come back and say, "Man, there was some kind of weird delay on that last night."
Yeah. No, thank God it was, a big noisy train wreck of a mess, and I was able to hide in there with it all. But that was a super fun moment. I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of forgotten about that.
I think it was JD that told me that story. I was trying to remember, but I just remember, my favorite part of that story was that Joe didn't know that it happened.
Yeah, and it wasn't, it's not that he was out of it or anything. It was, he was fully in the moment. It's just like, so I was like, yes.
So tell me this real quick, and maybe some people out there would like to know, because I know I want to know. And I've worked with a lot of guitar techs in my day, and I've never really asked them this. When it's kind of spurs from when you opened up and you knew it was that double neck. What's the responsibility of handling? You got Joe Perry's guitars and Jimmy Page and Slash's instruments and all that stuff. What is the feeling of the responsibility of having those really they're really under your possession at that point, and they're under your care and safety,
Yeah, I'm super, if you know anybody that's worked with me, I'm super crazy about security, especially with anything like that. Those guys have
iconic instruments.
Millions of dollars worth of guitars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just millions, right?
Yeah.
When Joe used to take his 59, he's got a bunch of old Les Pauls, quite a collection. And Les Pauls between, the 58, 59, and 60 Les Pauls are like the creme de la creme, the Les Paul people. Those are the super desired and usually most valuable. But so he has all of those, a couple of each usually. In his collection. He's got a great collection, and he would bring them out. Like, if we're playing in the Northeast and he's traveling from home, or if we're, he would bring these guitars out. So, that's a $500,000 guitar before you even connect it to the recordings and the guy that owns it. And those
right
down, but they can, I've seen them 500,000, 600,000, 200,000, depends. But often I would take guitars to my hotel room. And
it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I wouldn't go out. I mean, tonight I'm ordering in the guitar. The 59 is going to stay with me. I'm always the guy checking on security. When I was in Miami with Jimmy Page, he had the full collection down there. And, I had to talk with the people, what's the response time for the police at this place? Blah, blah, blah. Know what the security is, is there double locks? What are we going to do? Can we put them in the control room and lock that as well? I'm always thinking about that too, because you're right. That's, it's, forget about the money.
Yeah. It's not about the money.
If you lost the guitar that you recorded Stairway to Heaven on, you're going to have a problem. So yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, a ton of responsibility.
And you've got to have some relationship with either the security director on the tour, the production manager has to know that's vitally important to you, that securing, it's not just a thing, is there going to be a security guard here overnight when we play a second show. You have got to be 100% confident of all that, and they have to be in that same page as you and know that worries you, and it's part of your job, and everybody has to take that extremely serious.
Right. And on Guns N' Roses, there's a lot of really great guitars on that too. Not so much. He doesn't bring out the super old stuff usually, but Slash. But even Fortis has got some really, really great pieces.
Yeah.
We're in stadiums most of the time, so there's days in between, or you set up and sound check the day before, and stuff's, at the gig overnight, but they have a really crack security team, where I barely, it's almost insulting to mention it to any of those guys because they're so on it and they understand the gravity of what we're dealing with. That shout out to those guys because they really kick ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, real quick, I'm a big Van Halen fan. Obviously, I'm a Michael Anthony fan, but I know you teched for Wolfgang, right?
I did Sammy in '95 on the Balance tour. And I did the last two VH tours as Wolfgang and David Lee Roth's guy.
So Wolfgang I follow him on Instagram. That kid's got a great sense of humor. Is it the same? Is he like that in person, or is that just on Instagram? Because he's really funny on Instagram.
He is. I can't say enough about Wolfgang. Van Halen is one of my all-time favorite bands in the planet since forever, and I'm just happy that I've been able to do 3 tours now with those guys, with both singers, and Wolf is the nicest guy on the planet for somebody that could be a jerk.
Yeah,
his dad's Edward Van Halen, and
he's extremely talented, right? They say he's
extremely talented, and it bothers me because the purists, kind of, it's not Mike Anthony or whatever, but Wolfie can, like, bass isn't even his main instrument. He can burn down a drum kit. He can burn a guitar down. He can play excellent keys. He sings like a bird. That guy is so talented across the board. It's the apple did not fall far from the tree. He's got the magic that his dad has, and his mom is an incredible kind human, and I see a lot of his mom in him too, as far as his kind of the way his balance
himself. And I think it's funny. I love the stuff he does. I think he seems like a great guy.
He didn't kick Mike out of that band. I mean, they asked him to come and play, and if he wasn't playing, it wasn't like they were going to go get a outside bass player.
Yeah.
If it wasn't Wolf, they would have just folded.
I never understood that too much about the guy that takes the place of some iconic player. Why are you mad at that guy? He got
Somebody's
the call
gotta do
to
it.
play with an iconic band.
Yeah.
You would say yes. I don't understand that,
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the last questions that I want to ask you is, what is the best advice that anyone has ever given you? Whether it doesn't have to be about music business. It could be about anything, maybe something that a family member told you, or what's the best advice someone has ever given you?
To be a winner, you must surround yourself with winners, because the people you surround yourself with are a reflection and a part of you.
Love
Awesome.
it.
That's my mantra statement that rings through my head. And when I find myself around bad energy or people that I feel aren't my jam or whatever, I try and move on somewhere where, it's a more fertile environment for the type of person I am. So I want to surround myself with positivity more than negativity, if possible. And I'm no Mother Teresa here, and by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end of the day, when I close my eyes and I put my head down on my pillow, I know that's a true statement. And if you can stick to it, things will work out better for you.
I've shared stage left with you, and you always put that off. It's always nice and happy over there, and always putting off good energy.
I loved working with you, Stage Left. You and I were a good little team. I remember showing up at some of these big Euro fests and just dominating the stage, taking over and getting our shit up, and little satellite monitor areas for Xing out the stage, and cool shit that we did that the boss really dug.
Yeah.
And, I like working with you, Tater, because you're not like, talk to the hand, or, you listen, and I'll listen to you if, why don't you move your shit over this way 10 feet because it'll work. and you'll hear what other people have to say, and if it's bullshit, you just don't do it. But
I depend on the other people. That's what's made me successful. So
yeah,
do
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really the deal. Hey, well, listen,
Again,
we've
over.
got
I
to.
can't believe it.
Sorry, Tater, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's already 3:02. It's like I figured we just started. It's like every
Oh,
time.
I know. I was just gonna say that we have a couple of questions from the crowd that we're gonna bring into the Q&A answer period. This hour goes by super quick.
We'll get to Vitalis and all those questions. Yeah, on the next one.
Yeah. So tune in. In the next couple of days when we post the Q&A, we'll have some more questions for our friend here. Thank you so much for coming, Jim. Dude,
my pleasure. This was really good, and I feel like I just kind of caught up with you guys. Really,
yeah.
Did a podcast.
Well, that's the idea, and during this time, it's like we're trying to help other people, but it's like for us, it's like therapeutic, man. We get to talk to all our old friends that we haven't seen for a long time. So,
right on. Well, thanks for considering me for this, and I've never done anything like this, so it's kind of fun.
Well, you did great, man, and thank you so much. Thank you. So stay tuned and guys, watch for that Q&A thing coming up. Just a couple of little housekeeping things here at the end. Next week on Wrong End of the Snake, it's Steve Wood. Steve is a music manager in the Shelter Music Group based in Los Angeles. His closest clients include Godsmack, the Hollywood Vampires, Joe Perry, Johnny Depp, Hoobastank, Like a Storm, and Sully Erna. You can see all these connections, right? Anyway, Steve has had a long and sordid career starting in London with Charisma Records in 1974. He tour managed bands through the punk and rock eras of the 80s and 90s. Soundgarden, Megadeth, Nine Inch Nails, Scorpions, Audioslave, Stone Temple Pilots, and many more. In 2002, he was asked by global artist management Paul Geary, the former drummer of the 80s rock band Extreme, to partner under the umbrella of Irving Azoff. In 2019, Paul and Steve merged with Shelter Music Group, helping to manage some of the most recognized musicians and artists in the business. So next week is Big Time Manager. That'll be a lot of fun. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our videos. We're coming up on 1,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel, and we're super proud about it. Help us to push us over the edge. Tell all your friends, tell your mom, tell your sister, have them come and subscribe. Also, there's a major push in our industry to get Congress to pass the Restart Act and continue unemployment funding like PUA and FPUC. We are a dead industry right now. Unlike other industries, we have no jobs to apply for. For some, unemployment is the only thing keeping us from selling our homes and living on the streets. We need funding, like unemployment and paycheck protection, to keep the 11 million people in the live event industry afloat. Many of us are independent contractors or own small businesses that have not had income since March. We need help. Please go to the WeMakeEvents.org and the RoadieClinic.com for information on how to help. Contact your local representatives and remind them about our forgotten industry. Without skilled workers like Tater, myself, and Jim Service, there will be no live shows when we are allowed to gather again. Thank you for the support. Jim, thanks again for coming. We appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week.